Good to be with you this morning. I have my beautiful, hardworking, long-suffering wife with us this morning. Sandy, hold up your hand. It's good to be with you today. Vermont on a mission. Vermont has had a special spot in my heart for a long time. The first exposure I had to Vermont was in the 60s when I was a college student, and I know some of you weren't born then, but went on a campaign to Vermont, and that was the only other time I've ever been there, but it has always captured my interest and my heart, and I'll tell you a little more about that in just a moment. Vermont is in an area that we call Focus Northeast, and we have a special program that Speedy directs, and our purpose in that is to put preachers in the northeastern part of our country. It's a mission field, and empty pulpits in the northeast. As you can see, Vermont borders New York, and my older brother, lived there for a second time about 10 years ago, and he was commuting to upper state New York to worship because there was not a congregation in Castleton, which is in about the central part of the state of Vermont. While commuting, one of the members of the church in New York told him about a couple who were members of the church also living in the Castleton area. And so he looked them up, and this is, get the right button here. This is the couple that he met. Their name is Mike and Carol Adamman, and a sweet couple, but they began talking about the possibility of planting a church in the Castleton area. And so they began meeting around this table. That's in the Adamans' home. And so this table saw the beginning of the church in Castleton. They now have about 35, 40 members. They meet in this building. It's a rented building. They have offices and classrooms on the first floor, and the assembly area is down in the basement. And they've just about outgrown this building. They're talking about their next step in ministry. Several years ago, my brother Jim met this couple, and they began worshiping with them, Kurt and Karen Israel. And in 2011, they came to Sunset and went through our 2-year program and are doing a wonderful job. They're back home in Castleton, and they're just a delightful couple. They're working, they have a lot of energy. They've made a big difference in the community. People are starting to take notice of this new religious group that has been formed in their community. And so Kurt and Karen are doing well, doing a lot of innovative things to reach out to people there in the Castleton area. Sandy and I were invited to come to Vermont and do a seminar for them. And so I did a seminar entitled 8 Days That Changed the World, and it's about the last 8 days of Jesus' life, including the resurrection. And it was just a delight to be there with them. While we were there, a group from Dangerfield, Texas, had been doing a campaign before we arrived, and they knocked on about 500 homes, inviting people to come to the seminar. As a result of the seminar, they've had 4 people visit their service, and that's a big step for the Castleton Church because Vermont is a very difficult place, and the soil is hard. And so to get 4 people to come and worship with them is really exciting. And they are very excited about these new prospects that they have. The seminar started on Wednesday night. We did one session Wednesday night. We had Thursday and Friday off. And then we continued on Saturday with 3 sessions. And then on Sunday we had 3 sessions. So Thursday and Friday, what do we do? Well, being there in October, we went leaf peeping. And these were some of the people at the seminar. We saw a lot of beautiful sights. On Thursday, we went with a group from Dangerfield, and Kurt took us on a tour of the area. We saw some of the historic covered bridges. I don't think I'd ever seen a covered bridge before, but it's just beautiful. And we were right at the peak of the leaf peeping season. While we were there was a lady from Texas in a convertible that drove up. She happened to be blonde, and she had been through the woods of Vermont, and while she was going on the winding roads going up a mountain, she came around a curve, and there was a big flock of sheep that a sheep herder was taking across the highway. And so she stopped and watched them cross, and she got talking to the sheep herder, and she was just really enamored with these sheep. And she said to the sheep herder, if I can tell you how many sheep are in your flock, would you give me one of your lambs? And he said, yeah. And so she said, 283. And his mouth dropped open. He said, that is right. How did you know? She said, well, I just have a sense of numbers. So she went out, she picked out her animal, she put it in the back seat of her convertible, she tied it in with, the seat belt, and she got in the seat and got ready to go, and the sheep herder said, lady, if I could tell you the true color of your hair, would you give my dog back? Well, these are some of the sights that we saw. This was taken there from one of the bridges. This was this was the longest covered bridge in the country. Just beautiful colors. This was looking down from a bridge, looking down into the gorge below. It was just astounding. Walk your horses or pay $2 fine. This was a historic community that Rockefeller had been a part of, and he didn't like seeing the power lines going through the city, through the town, so he paid to have them buried. And there's not a power line in sight in that whole town. Pretty amazing. On Friday, Kurt and Karen just insisted that we take their little Volkswagen convertible. We went down to Bennington and explored down there a little bit on Friday. On Friday night, Sandy taught the girls, the ladies, and I met with the men and did some planning and some problem solving. What does this mean? Okay. We went, for 50 years, I've been taking a magazine called Hemmings Motor News, and it's published in Bennington, Vermont. And they have a showroom with their car collection, and so we went through that while we had a little bit of time. I'd like to spend our remaining time talking about some reflections of the church in Vermont. And after the seminar was over, we drove down to Boston, took a few days vacation, and saw a very historic part of our country. We had been wanting to go see Boston for a long time. We spent a day and a half there. And then we went down to Hershey, Pennsylvania. One of the largest car shows in the world is in Hershey in October, and so I got to see part of that. And then on Sunday, we went to Lewistown, where Justin is from. Got to meet his parents, and I believe your uncle, isn't that right, is there? Got to meet him. And Lewistown is an example of the need for Focus Northeast, because they are without a preacher. Their congregation, 35, 45, somewhere in that range. And they have a very nice building, and they are without a spokesman to preach God's Word to them and to that community. But back to Vermont. Vermont is the second least religious state in the Union. Population about 628,000. Members of the church, I've heard estimates from 200 to 602. The Church of Christ in the United States gives a figure of 602, which is probably more than what there actually are. But there are only 10 congregations in the whole state. And my brother helped establish 2 of those 10. And so he had lived there years before, had started a congregation, and then now Castleton, along with the Ottomans, began that congregation. So the church is very weak in the Northeast, especially in Vermont. Another thing that we noticed is that congregations are a long ways apart. My brother Jim was driving, probably a couple hours to upstate New York to worship. And even in Vermont, the congregations are a long ways apart. People drive 30 minutes to an hour. It's not unusual for people to drive that far to go to worship. It's truly a mission field. And it's very representative of what we have in the Northeast. People are self-sustaining. They're dependent upon themselves, and God is not a part of their lives, a lot of them. And so there's a lot of work to be done. So while you're here, I hope that you'll consider working in the Northeast. There's a great need for preachers, for evangelists, for missionaries in the Northeast. And there's a lot of opportunities. Many congregations are without preachers. If you go to some of these little congregations, you'll probably need to raise support to be there, because they won't have enough resources to support a preacher. And so I hope you'll consider that as you go through the training, and as you see opportunities that come before you. I hope you won't forget about the Northeast. Truly a great opportunity to take the gospel. So Vermont, a mission field ready for the harvest. And we need you in the Northeast. Thank you.